Sign this for me, Mom, it's just a small favor. That's what my son said, standing in my kitchen like he owned the air I was breathing. He didn't ask, he didn't explain. He shoved a thick stack of papers into my hands like they were nothing more than junk mail. I need it done today, he added, his voice sharp. No questions. No questions. I looked up at him, searching his face, my son. The same boy I once rocked to sleep. The same child who used to grab my hand crossing the street. Now his eyes barely met mine. He stood there with his arms crossed, jaw tight, tapping his phone like every second I took was an inconvenience. Like I was already slowing him down just by existing. Alex, I said softly, trying not to shake. What is this? He sighed, loud, deliberate. Mom, don't start, he said, rolling his eyes. It's boring paperwork, business stuff. Everyone signs things like this. He flipped through the pages fast, too fast, and stopped at the very end. His finger slammed down on a bright yellow sticky note. Just sign here, he said. I'll pick the papers up tonight. Not if I signed. When I signed, something twisted deep in my stomach. I glanced down at the papers. They were heavy, not just thick, heavy in a way that made my chest feel tight, long sentences. Legal language, words meant to confuse people who trusted too much. This looks serious, I whispered. His face changed instantly, not fear, not concern, annoyance. Mom, he snapped quietly, leaning closer, you're overthinking it. It's just a small favor. Then he said the one thing he knew would corner me. You trust me, right? That wasn't a question, that was pressure. Before I could answer, his phone rang. He turned away, lowering his voice, but I still heard him. Yeah, he said, she'll sign today, I told you. She'll sign today. My hands went cold. When he hung up, he smiled, confident, relaxed, like the decision had already been made for me. See, he said lightly. No big deal. He grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. Just leave it on the table, he added over his shoulder. I'll be back tonight. He leaned in and kissed the air near my cheek. Thanks, Mom, he said. You always come through. Then the door closed, the house went silent, too silent. I stood there alone, the papers trembling in my hands, his words echoing in my head. Today, no questions, I'll pick them up tonight. Slowly I turned back to the last page. I didn't read everything, I didn't need to. All I saw was my name, typed neatly, officially, right next to a single word that made my heart drop. Guarantor. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I nodded exactly like he expected. Then I walked into my bedroom, opened the closet and pulled out my old suitcase, because my son thought I was trapped. What he didn't know was that I was about to leave something on that table that would destroy his entire plan. I closed the bedroom door behind me and leaned against it, pressing my palm to my chest like I could slow my heart down by force. The house felt smaller all of a sudden, too quiet, too tight. Like the walls had heard everything and were judging me for not speaking up sooner. I opened the closet and pulled out the old suitcase from the top shelf, the one with the broken zipper, the one I hadn't used since my husband passed. Dust puffed into the air as I set it on the bed, and for a second I just stared at it, wondering how my life had come back to this point. I told myself to breathe, slow, steady. I started packing, folding clothes with hands that wouldn't quite stop shaking. Sweaters first, then blouses, practical things, not sentimental, that came later. Every item felt heavier than it should have, like each one carried a memory I hadn't had time to grieve yet. I kept hearing my son's voice in my head, it's just a small favor. No questions, you trust me, right? That last one hurt the most, because I had trusted him, over and over. I'd trusted him when he said he needed help just this once. Trusted him when he said he'd handle things. Trusted him when he told me not to worry because he had it under control. And now here I was, packing a suitcase in my own house like a guest who'd overstayed her welcome. I sat down on the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted, and picked up a framed photo from the nightstand. My son at 10 years old, missing 2 teeth, grinning like he owned the world. I traced my thumb over the glass and felt something crack inside my chest. When did he stop seeing me as his mother? When did I become just a signature? I placed the photo face down and stood up. That was when anger crept in. Not loud, not explosive, quiet, focused, cold. I walked back into the kitchen and looked at the stack of papers sitting on the table exactly where he'd left them. So confident, so sure I'd do what I always did. I flipped through the pages again, slower this time, letting the words sink in, feeling the weight of every sentence. The language wasn't meant for someone like me. It was meant to scare me into compliance, to rush me, to make me feel stupid if I asked questions. Classic move. I laughed under my breath, a short, humorless sound. Nice try, I muttered. I reached for a pen, then stopped. Not yet. Instead, I walked to the drawer by the fridge and pulled out a yellow notepad, the same one I used for grocery lists and reminders. My hands were steady now as I tore off a page and began to write. Not everything, just enough. Enough to make him pause, enough to make him sweat. I folded the note carefully and placed it on top of the papers, right where he couldn't miss it, right where his eyes would go first. Then I picked up my phone. I scrolled past his name, past missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize, and stopped at one contact I hadn't used in a long time. Someone who didn't rush me, someone who read the fine print, someone who didn't smile while pushing papers across a table. My finger hovered for a second, then I pressed call. As the phone rang, I looked around the kitchen one last time. The table where I'd made him breakfast for years. The chair where he used to do homework. The spot where he stood today, acting like I owed him my future. I grabbed my suitcase and headed for the door, because my son thought tonight would end with my signature. What he didn't know was that it was going to end with a reckoning. The phone rang twice before someone answered. Hello, hearing that voice steadied me in a way I hadn't expected. Calm, measured, the kind of voice that didn't rush, didn't interrupt, didn't try to charm its way through serious things. It's me, I said quietly. I need help. There was a pause, not confusion, recognition. I was wondering when you'd call, he replied. I exhaled slowly, like I'd been holding my breath for years. I told him I couldn't talk long, that my son thought I was about to sign something and would be back later to collect it. I didn't give details yet, I didn't need to. Bring the papers, he said. Every page, don't sign a thing. And don't tell him where you're going. That last part sent a chill down my spine. So it's bad, I asked. It's bad enough that you trusted your instinct, he said evenly. And that might have just saved you. I hung up and stood there for a moment, phone pressed against my chest, letting that sink in. Saved me. I locked the front door behind me and stepped outside. The late afternoon air felt sharp, almost electric. My hands tightened around the handle of my suitcase as I walked down the steps. I half expected my son to come roaring back into the driveway, demanding answers, demanding obedience. But the street was quiet, too quiet. As I drove, memories flooded in without permission. All the times I'd covered for him, all the times I'd said he didn't mean it, or he's under a lot of stress. I remembered the late-night phone calls asking for help, the promises that never quite came true, the way he'd always acted like he deserved my support simply because he was my son. Family, that word can be dangerous in the wrong hands. I parked, shut off the engine, and sat there gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. For a brief moment, guilt crept in, whispering that maybe I was overreacting. That maybe this really was just a small favor. Then I remembered the way he said no questions. I gathered the papers and walked inside. The office smelled like old books and coffee, the kind of place where decisions were made carefully, not rushed. I laid the stack on the desk and he flipped through them silently, his brow furrowed, his jaw tightened. He didn't say a word for a long time. That silence told me everything. Finally, he looked up at me. "Did he explain any of this?" he asked. I shook my head. "Did he tell you what would happen if things went wrong?" Again, no. He leaned back in his chair and let out a slow breath. "He planned this," he said flatly. "He counted on you trusting him, he counted on you not reading too closely, and he definitely counted on you signing today." My stomach dropped. "So what do?" I whispered. A small, grim smile crossed his face. "You don't sign," he said, "and you don't go home tonight." That hit harder than I expected. I thought of my kitchen, my table, the note I'd left behind. "And when he comes looking for you?" I asked. "That," he said calmly, "is where things get interesting." I picked up my suitcase again, my heart pounding louder now, not with fear but with something else. Resolve, because my son thought he was in control. What he didn't know was that his timeline was about to fall apart. I didn't go home that night. That alone felt wrong, like I was breaking some invisible rule I'd lived by my whole life. Mothers go home, mothers wait, mothers smooth things over. But that night I sat on the edge of a hotel bed staring at my phone, watching the screen light up again and again. Alex calling, Alex texting. "Where are you? Did you sign? Mom, answer me." Each message came faster than the last. Shorter. Sharper, the confidence in his tone slowly cracking into irritation. I didn't reply. I placed the phone face down on the nightstand and folded my hands in my lap, forcing myself to sit with the silence. My heart was pounding so loud it felt like it might give me away, even here. Somewhere my son was standing in my kitchen, looking at that table, looking at those papers, looking for my signature. I imagined him checking his watch, pacing, telling himself I was just being dramatic, that I'd come around like I always did. Because that's what I'd trained him to expect. The knock on my hotel door made me flinch. I opened it cautiously, half expecting trouble, but it was just the clerk delivering an extra blanket. I thanked him and closed the door, leaning my forehead against the wood for a long moment. Get it together, I told myself. I wasn't in danger, but I was exposed. That was the feeling I couldn't shake. Exposed. Like stepping out of a role you've played for decades and suddenly realizing you don't know who you are without it. Around midnight my phone buzzed again, a voicemail. I listened. "Mom," Alex said, his voice tight now, no smile in it anymore. "I'm at the house, call me back, this isn't funny." Not funny, that word strung. Because to him this was never about me. It was about timing, control, convenience. I deleted the voicemail. Then I lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling, replaying the day from the moment he shoved those papers into my hands. Every sigh, every rushed word, every time he'd cut me off. How long had he been planning this? How long had he assumed I wouldn't push back? The answer settled heavy in my chest. Too long. Sometime in the early hours of the morning, exhaustion finally pulled me under. Not peaceful sleep, restless, broken, the kind where you wake up already tired. When morning came, I checked my phone, no new messages. That silence scared me more than the calls, because silence meant he'd stopped asking. And when someone like Alex stops asking, it means they're about to demand. I showered, dressed, and sat at the small desk by the window, staring out at the city waking up. Cars honking, people rushing to work, life moving forward like nothing had changed, but everything had changed. Because my son thought last night would end with a signature. Instead, it ended with questions he couldn't control. And the day ahead was going to make him realize something he never expected, that I wasn't playing my old role anymore. By late afternoon, my phone started buzzing again, not calling this time. Texting, short messages, sharp edges. "Where are you? We need to talk. This is getting ridiculous." I stared at the screen, feeling that familiar pull in my chest. The instinct to explain, to apologize, to fix whatever he was feeling before it turned into something worse. That instinct had kept me quiet for years. I set the phone down without answering. An hour later, the messages came faster. Mom, don't do this. I'm under a lot of pressure right now. You said you'd help me, not are you okay, not did I scare you, just help me. I closed my eyes and leaned back in the chair. Somewhere between those words, something inside me hardened. A line I didn't even realize was still flexible finally snapped into place. This wasn't about trust, it was about obedience. The phone rang again. I let it go to voicemail. Then another and another. On the fourth call, I answered. Mom, he said immediately, his voice tight, forced calm, stretched thin. Where are you? I needed some time, I replied evenly. A pause, time, that word didn't sit well with him. You left the papers on the table, he said, not a question. Yes, and you didn't sign. No, his breath came through the phone, sharp and controlled. Why, there it was, the moment he realized I wasn't following the script. I wanted to understand what I was being asked to sign, I said. You don't need to understand it, he snapped. That's the whole point, it's handled. Handled by him, for him, using me. You said no questions, I reminded him. Another pause, longer this time. That was just stress talking, he said quickly. You know how things get, look, I'll come by tonight, we'll go over it together. Like I hadn't already tried that. No, I said quietly. The words surprised both of us. No, I repeated, I'm not signing anything tonight. His voice dropped, losing that forced calm. Mom, you're making this harder than it needs to be. Harder for who? For you, he continued. For me, for everyone. I pictured him standing in my kitchen, pacing the floor, jaw clenched, trying to regain control of a situation that had slipped through his fingers. You promised, he added. And there it was, the guilt. The oldest tool in his box. I promised to help, I said slowly. I didn't promise to sign blindly. The silence on the other end was thick, dangerous. When he spoke again, his tone had changed. No charm, no patience. You're overreacting, he said coldly. You're letting your imagination run wild. Just come home, sign the papers. We'll forget this whole thing ever happened. Forget like it was nothing. Like it wasn't my name sitting on that page. I won't be home tonight, I said. Another pause, then softer now, calculated. If you don't sign, he said, you're putting me in a really bad position. I closed my eyes. For the first time, I heard what he wasn't saying. That bad position wasn't emotional, it was financial, and whatever it was already bigger than he'd let on. I need more time, I said. No, he replied instantly. You don't. I ended the call. My hands were shaking now, but not with fear. With clarity, because the way he spoke to me just now, that wasn't a son asking for help. That was a man panicking because his backup plan was slipping away. And for the first time, I knew something for certain. If I signed those papers, I wouldn't just be helping him. I'd be sinking with him. That night I didn't sleep. I lay on the hotel bed staring at the ceiling, replaying his voice over and over in my head. The sharp edge, the impatience, the way he'd gone quiet when I said no, not hurt, not confused, but calculating. Like a chess player losing a piece. At some point near dawn, I got up and spread the papers across the small desk by the window. I hadn't wanted to look too closely before. Fear will do that, convince you ignorance is safer. But not anymore. I made coffee using the cheap hotel machine and sat down, forcing myself to read every line. Slowly, carefully, the way someone does when they finally accept that whatever they're about to learn might change everything. The language was slippery, intentionally vague. Sentences that ran on forever, looping back on themselves, burying responsibility under polite legal phrases. I read them twice, sometimes 3 times, and the more I read, the worse it felt. My name appeared more than once. Not just at the end, not just as a formality. It was woven through the pages, tied to obligations I didn't remember agreeing to, responsibilities I didn't recognize. This wasn't a favor. This was an anchor, My hands began to shake, and I had to stop, pressing my palms flat against the desk until they steadied. I could feel my pulse in my throat, loud and insistent. How long had he known? How long had he planned to put this in front of me and rush me into signing before I could think? My phone buzzed. Another message. You're blowing this way out of proportion. Everyone signs things like this. Stop making it dramatic, dramatic. I almost laughed, because there was nothing dramatic about contracts designed to trap someone who trusted you. Nothing dramatic about rushing your own mother so she wouldn't notice the weight you were placing on her shoulders. I didn't respond. Instead, I flipped to the final page again. The signature line stared back at me, plain and patient, waiting like it always had, waiting for me to give in. I imagined Alex sitting somewhere, tapping his phone, telling himself I'd cave. That I always did, that I'd get scared, feel guilty, and rush home to fix everything. He'd built his whole plan on that assumption, that I wouldn't read, that I wouldn't ask, that I wouldn't walk away. I folded the papers carefully and slid them back into the folder. My movements were calm now, deliberate. The fear was still there, but it had sharpened into something useful: focus. I picked up my phone and typed one short message. I need more time, don't come by tonight. The reply came almost instantly. You're making a huge mistake. I stared at the screen, then turned the phone face down. Maybe. Or maybe this was the first right decision I'd made in a long time. Because the more I read those pages, the clearer it became. Alex wasn't asking for help. He was trying to hand me his problem and walk away. And whatever mess he was in, it was already deep, deeper than he wanted me to know. By mid-morning, the fear had settled into something heavier: understanding. I sat by the window watching people hurry past on the street below, all of them convinced they knew where they were going. I used to feel that way too. Certain, secure. Like family was the one thing you never had to double-check. Now I wasn't so sure. I opened my phone again and scrolled back through old messages from Alex. Not just from this week. Months, years. I hadn't done this before. I hadn't wanted to, but once you start seeing cracks, you can't unsee them. Can you help me just this once? I'll pay you back soon. I'm under pressure right now. You don't need to worry about the details. The words blurred together, forming a pattern that made my stomach sink. There were always details I wasn't supposed to worry about. Always urgency. Always reassurance wrapped around avoidance. And every time, I'd stepped in before asking what stepping in actually meant. I thought back to the last time he needed help. How he'd shown up unannounced, pacing my living room, talking fast. How he'd said everything was under control, even while asking me to fix it. I remembered the pit in my stomach then too. I'd ignored it. This time I couldn't. My phone buzzed again. I talked to someone. This needs to be done today, someone. Not who, not why, just pressure. I typed a reply, then erased it. Typed again. Erased again. Anything I said right now would give him something to push against, so I said nothing. Instead, I made another call, not to argue. Not to explain, to confirm. The conversation was short, but it left my hands cold and my back straight. There were things Alex hadn't mentioned, things he'd deliberately skipped, consequences he'd assumed I'd never bother to uncover. I ended the call and sat very still. The picture was coming together now, and it wasn't pretty. This wasn't desperation, it was damage control. I looked back at the papers one more time, seeing them differently now. The rushed signatures. The buried clauses. The way responsibility quietly shifted from one name to another, from his to mine. A knock at the door startled me. I stood slowly, heart racing, then relaxed when I saw it was housekeeping. I thanked them and closed the door again, leaning against it as my breath caught up with me. He might show up. That thought hadn't left me since the night before. Alex had never liked losing control, never liked waiting. And now waiting was all he was doing. I checked the time. Still hours before evening. Plenty of time for him to convince himself this was my fault, that I was being difficult, that I was ruining everything. That thought used to scare me. Now. It clarified things, because if refusing to sign meant I was suddenly the problem, then I'd never really been part of the solution. I packed the papers back into my bag and zipped it shut. Carefully, deliberately, the next move wouldn't be rushed. And when Alex finally realized that, it was going to hit him harder than he expected. I knew he was coming before I heard the knock. There's a certain kind of silence that settles right before something breaks. The air feels thicker, time slows just enough to warn you. Then the knock, hard, sharp, not asking. I froze where I stood, my hand still resting on the strap of my bag. My heart slammed against my ribs, but I didn't move. I waited. Another knock, louder this time. "Mom," Alex called through the door, his voice tight. "I know you're in there." So he'd figured it out. I took a slow breath and opened the door. He stood there stiff and irritated, jaw clenched, eyes already scanning the room like he was looking for the papers. Like he expected to see them sitting neatly on a table, ready for him to grab. "You didn't answer my calls," he said, stepping inside without waiting for permission. "I was busy," I replied. "With what?" he snapped, turning to face me. Running away, that word hit harder than I expected. Running away, as if taking time to read before signing your life away was cowardice. "I needed space," I said calmly. He laughed, short and humorless. "Space," he said. "You don't get space right now, you get responsibility." There it was, not concern, not worry, ownership. He reached into his jacket and pulled out another copy of the papers, already folded, already prepared. "I brought another set," he said, placing them on the counter. "In case you misplaced the first ones." I looked at them, didn't touch them. "I'm not signing anything today," I said. His face hardened instantly. "Why are you doing this?" he demanded. "Do you have any idea what position you're putting me in?" I met his eyes. "Do you have any idea what you're asking me to take on?" He hesitated just for a second. Then he shook his head, frustrated. "You're blowing this up," he said. "This is standard, people do this all the time. You're acting like I'm trying to hurt you." Trying, that word hung between us. "I asked for time," I said. "You didn't give it, because we don't have time," he snapped. "Deadlines don't care about feelings, Mom." Deadlines, plural. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "How many people are involved in this?" I asked quietly. His eyes flickered, just once. "Enough. That's not your concern," he said quickly. "All you need to do is sign. All you need to do." I stared at him, really stared at him, and suddenly I wasn't looking at my son anymore. I was looking at someone desperate, cornered, afraid. "Leave," I said. "What?" "Leave," I repeated, my voice steady. "I won't be signing today or tomorrow." His mouth opened, then closed again. "You're making a huge mistake," he said finally. "And when this blows up, don't say I didn't warn you." I nodded. "Okay." That wasn't the reaction he expected. He stood there for a moment longer, searching my face for doubt, for guilt, for the old version of me that would fold just to keep the peace. He didn't find her. With a frustrated breath, he turned and walked out, slamming the door behind him. I locked it. Then I leaned against it, my legs shaking now that the confrontation was over. Because that visit confirmed everything. This wasn't a favor, it wasn't a misunderstanding, it was a plan. And Alex was running out of time. After Alex left, the silence felt different, not empty, loaded, like the quiet right before a storm finally breaks. I didn't sit down, I didn't pace. I stood there in the middle of the room, replaying every word he'd said, every hesitation he hadn't meant to show. Deadlines, people involved, responsibility. Those weren't words you used for a small favor. They were words you used when something was already on fire. I pulled the papers out again, spreading them across the counter with a steadiness that surprised me. My hands weren't shaking anymore. Fear had burned itself out, leaving behind something sharper. Focus. I started reading again, slower this time, not just looking at what was written but at what wasn't. Clauses buried in polite language. Obligations that didn't activate immediately but waited. Like landmines. One phrase kept pulling my attention back. In the event of default. That word sat there quietly, pretending to be harmless. I reached for my phone and made another call. This time the pause on the other end was longer. Did he explain what happens if he can't meet the terms? The voice asked. No, I said, a breath. He wouldn't, came the reply. That was all I needed to hear. I sat down slowly, the weight of that sentence pressing into my chest. Alex hadn't planned for success. He'd planned for survival, for a way out. And that way out had my name on it, not as a partner. As a shield, I remembered something he'd said earlier, almost casually. When this blows up, he hadn't said if. He said when. My phone buzzed again, a message from him. We need to fix this. They're asking questions. My jaw tightened. So it had started. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my bag and pulled out a small envelope I'd tucked inside earlier that day. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't flashy, but it was deliberate. I placed it on the table and stared at it for a long moment, feeling the shift fully settle in. Alex thought I was stalling. He thought I was scared. He thought if he applied enough pressure, I'd cave like always. What he didn't realize was that I wasn't backing away. I was stepping aside. And when someone steps aside at the right moment, everything collapses exactly where it's been leaning. The phone rang just after sunset, not Alex, someone else, a number I didn't recognize. I let it ring once, twice, then I answered. Is this Mrs.? The man paused, checking his notes. His mother. The way he said it made my stomach tighten. Yes, I replied, keeping my voice calm. Another pause. Good, we've been trying to reach your son all day. There it was. The confirmation I hadn't wanted and somehow expected. He spoke carefully, like every word had been rehearsed by a legal team. There's been a delay, he said. A few documents haven't been finalized. I pictured Alex's confident smile. The way he'd leaned back in his chair like everything was under control. And what does that have to do with me? I asked. Silence, then a soft exhale. You're listed as essential, he said. Essential, not important, not helpful. Essential like a last bolt holding a bridge together. I haven't signed anything, I said. That sentence landed hard. The man cleared his throat. Yes, that's why I'm calling. So Alex hadn't told them. He'd promised something he didn't own. And if I don't? I asked. This time the pause stretched longer. Well, he said slowly, that would complicate things for everyone involved. For everyone, not him. I thanked him and hung up before he could say more. My hands were steady, but my heart was pounding now, not with fear but with certainty. Alex hadn't just asked for help, he'd already spent it. I walked back to the table and looked at the envelope again. Inside it wasn't money. It wasn't a signature, it was something far more dangerous. Truth. My phone lit up almost immediately. Alex's name. I didn't answer. Another call, then a message. Please, just talk to me. I picked up my suitcase and zipped it shut. Not because I was running, because I was done being cornered. When Alex came back tonight, he'd be expecting ink on paper. What he'd find instead was the moment his plan stopped breathing. The front door opened hard, not slammed, not gentle, controlled. I heard his shoes before I saw him. Slow, measured, like a man rehearsing a conversation in his head. Mom, Alex called out. No answer. I stayed where I was. Let him feel it. Let him feel the silence stretch just a little too long. He stepped into the kitchen and stopped cold. The papers were still there, untouched, exactly where he'd left them, but something was different. The chair across from the table was empty. My coat was gone, so was my purse. His confidence cracked just for a second. You didn't sign yet, he asked, forcing a chuckle. It's fine, I'll wait. I walked in then, slow, calm. I won't be signing, I said. He blinked once, twice, like his brain needed a second to catch up. What? He laughed. Mom, stop, this isn't funny. Funny, that word did it. You didn't explain everything, I said quietly. His smile tightened. I explained enough, he replied. You don't need all the boring details. There it was, the slip. I got a call today, I said. That wiped the smile clean off his face. A call, from who, he already knew. I could see it in his eyes, that quick flash of panic he tried to swallow. Someone who said I was essential, I continued. Someone who said things couldn't move forward without me. His jaw clenched. They shouldn't have called you, he snapped. That wasn't the plan. The plan, not the conversation, not the discussion, the plan. So there was a plan, I said, silence, heavy, ugly. You're overreacting, he muttered, rubbing his forehead. Everyone does this, it's normal, normal to corner your own mother. I needed it done today, he added, voice sharper now. You always help me, why are you acting like this? I looked at him, really looked. And for the first time I didn't see my son. I saw a man who thought pressure was love and urgency was consent. I raised you better than this, I said. His voice rose. I didn't have a choice. There it was. The truth trying to claw its way out. You always say that, I replied, right before you ask me to carry something heavy. His face hardened. If you don't sign, he said slowly, things are going to get messy. Messy, not hard. Not uncomfortable, messy, like he'd already accepted collateral damage. I picked up my suitcase. That finally rattled him. What are you doing? Where are you going? I met his eyes. Somewhere I can think, I said. And somewhere your pressure can't reach me. He laughed, sharp, humorless. You'll come back, he said. You always do. I paused at the door. No, I replied. This time you'll come looking for me. And when he does, the power won't be in his hands anymore. I didn't go far, that was the funny part. He thought distance was geography, I knew better. Distance is leverage. I checked into a small hotel 10 minutes away. Nothing fancy, clean, quiet, anonymous. The kind of place where no one asks questions and no one knows your story. I set my suitcase down and sat on the edge of the bed. For the first time all day, my hands started to shake. Not fear, release, I let it happen. Then I breathed, slow, deep, my phone buzzed, once, twice, then again. Alex, where are you? We need to talk. This is getting blown out of proportion. Blown out of proportion. That phrase always comes out when someone realizes they pushed too far but doesn't want to say sorry. I didn't reply. Instead, I pulled the envelope from my bag, the one he thought was harmless. The one he thought I wouldn't read carefully. I laid everything out on the small desk, page after page. Language so dense it was designed to exhaust you. Sign here, initial there, don't ask questions, but I asked them anyway. I read every line, slowly, that's when I saw it. The clause that made my chest go cold, not my son's name, mine. Again and again, I wasn't just helping, I wasn't just backing him, I was standing in front of the blast. My phone rang. This time not Alex, another unknown number, I answered. Mrs., thank you for taking the call, a woman said, calm but firm. I won't take much of your time. I leaned back in the chair, I'm listening. She didn't sugarcoat it, didn't soften the edges. There's concern your son may not be fully transparent with you, she said. And we need to verify that you understand your position, my position. And if I don't proceed, I asked, a pause, then honesty. Then the responsibility falls entirely on him, she said, and the consequences will be significant. I thanked her and ended the call. The room felt very quiet after that. I stared at the papers again, at my name. At the space where my signature was supposed to go. That's when I made the final decision, not out of anger, not revenge, but self-respect. I took out a pen, not to sign, to write. I left one page on the table back home, just one. With a note clipped neatly on top. No explanation, no argument, just the truth. My phone buzzed again. Alex, please, just come back. I turned the phone face down. Tomorrow he wouldn't be asking. Tomorrow he'd be panicking. And when he finally read what I left behind, he'd realized the favor he asked for had turned into the lesson he deserved. The next morning came quietly, too quietly, the kind of quiet that only exists right before reality hits. Alex didn't call at first, that's how I knew he was reading. I pictured him standing in the kitchen, coffee untouched, eyes locked on the table. The papers spread out just like he'd left them, but right on top the page I'd placed there. No signature, no initials, just my handwriting. I read everything. You didn't forget to tell me, you chose not to. I imagined his breath catching, that moment when confidence turns into dread. I won't be your safety net, I won't be your shield. And I won't carry what you were too afraid to face. My phone buzzed once, then again. Alex, I let it ring. There are consequences, the note continued. You taught me that when I was young. Today I'm returning the lesson. I knew exactly when he finished reading, because that's when the calls stopped. No anger, no pleading, just silence. Hours later, one message came through, not loud, not dramatic. I didn't think you'd say no. That was the problem. He never thought he had to ask. I sat by the window of that small hotel room watching people move through their ordinary lives. No million-dollar pressure. No traps, just freedom. I didn't feel victorious. I felt clear. I loved my son. I always would. But love doesn't mean surrendering your future to someone else's shortcuts. When I checked out later that day, I didn't rush. I didn't look back. Somewhere behind me, a plan was collapsing under its own weight. And somewhere ahead of me was a life where my name only appeared on things I chose. Because the most dangerous lie a parent can believe is that saying no means losing their child. Sometimes it's the only way to save yourself.